history of Chanukah. Right? All right, we have to go back before Chanukah because it has a lot to do with the temple. So we go back to Solomon's time. We can even go a little bit before that to David's time. David had the dream to take the tabernacle, and with that we have to go really back to Moses' time, where God instructed Moses with the dimensions and the items, pieces of furniture for the temple, for the sanctuary. And then David wanted to give it a permanent structure. So he wanted to build a temple. God told him no, he couldn't do it, that his son Solomon was going to do it. And sure enough, that's what Solomon did. David helped finance it. Solomon went ahead and built a beautiful, magnificent temple for the Lord. And sacrifices were offered there for many, many years until the Babylonian captivity. The Babylonians came and destroyed it. Right? And so we got this sequence here. Babylon comes along and destroys the temple. And they reign from about 605 BC to about 539 BCE. And this is amazing, this structure, or this order of these kingdoms, one after another, that come in and control this area, are prophesied in the book of Daniel. And Daniel lived during the time of Babylon. So he lived during that first kingdom. And yet he prophesied there would be these three others after him, and then actually another one. And he prophesies them all in order and gets them all amazingly correct. So correct that skeptics of the validity of the Bible say that the book of Daniel had to be written way down in this time period for anyone to be able to know that sequence. And he records it actually in three different chapters. Daniel 2, Daniel 7, and here's a picture of the Daniel 2 vision that he has, and then the Daniel 7, actually the King Nebuchadnezzar has in Daniel 2, and then Daniel 7 in that order. And then Daniel chapter 8 also goes through this whole sequence. And even Daniel chapter 11 also really covers this sequence as well. So the sequence is Babylon. Babylon comes and destroys Solomon's temple, takes us captive to Babylon. And so we have the book of Daniel written at that time. And then the Persians come in about 539 BCE, and the Persians take over the Babylonians, take over their territory, plus what they had originally, the Persian Empire, and so it grew. And they reigned till about 331 BCE. And what Bible book do we have that takes place during the time of Persia? Say it a little louder. Esther, that's right. Book of Esther, that's right. And we had a holiday for that. And what holiday do we celebrate? Purim, very good, right. And so that takes place during the time of Persia. And then the Persians were taken over by the Greeks about 331 BCE till about 168 BCE, and they reigned for that time period. And then they're taken over by Rome, and Rome comes through, and Rome dominates for a much longer period of time, from 168 BCE all the way to 476 AD, or CE, however you want to look at it. And so that's the order of these kingdoms, and then Rome continues really to the very end of time. And so that's the sequence. And now, what books do we have taking place during the Roman kingdom? The Gospels, right. The Gospels and the letters of Paul take place during the Roman kingdom, right? And so, what book of the Bible do we have being written and taking place during the Greek kingdom? Nothing. That's right. Very good. There is no Bible book being written or taking place during the Greek kingdom, but we do have a holiday. What holiday do we have that reminds us of the Greek kingdom? Hanukkah. That's right. That's right. That was a whole build-up just to get us to there. All right. So that we can see it in sequence. So this is why we do have the whole sequence when we had Hanukkah in there, and understand it in that light. And it is recorded in the Apocrypha, which is not part of the standard Bibles, but the historical account is written there and in other places as well. And so we're going to be looking at this time frame right here, Greece taking over after the Persians. The Persians allowed us to go back, under Cyrus, to go back to Israel and to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. And so then during the time of the Greeks, the first main power of the Greeks was Alexander the Great, right? And he went and conquered all these areas. And Daniel describes him as a notable horn, as a mighty power, that he would come and he does take over all this area. And then his desire is to Hellenize the rest of the world, or the area that he had conquered. And someone told me that it gets the name, the Hellenization comes from his mother's name was Helen. I only heard that once. I don't know. I didn't research it out to double check it, but that could be. And so he shares the Hellenistic culture, or the Greek culture, with all the nations that they were overtaking. And that included the dress, sometimes the language, a lot of times the religion, and so they would go and influence the world that way. And we're still affected by that today. We still have segments of Greek culture, Greek words, and Greek thought, and a lot of the famous writers from that time still affecting us today. But Alexander, other than being a mighty conqueror and taking over nations and stuff like that, he was fairly good, especially to the Jewish people. He didn't force his Hellenization plan upon us. He allowed us to keep our religion. He allowed us to keep our temple. And he was actually very good to the Jews. He allowed us to continue to live there. A lot of the conquerors who would come through, they'd take over your country, and they would take you and they would disperse you somewhere else. So you didn't have your homeland anymore. But he let us stay there, and it was pretty good. But then he dies. He dies at a fairly young age. And Daniel prophesies that horn, that notable horn, this is in Daniel chapter 8, would be divided into 4 horns. And that's exactly what happened to the Greek kingdom. It divides into 4 sections. And we see that here in this vision, this leopard with 4 heads, indicating these 4 segments. And here's a little map of that. So here's the Greek Empire divisions, all these colored areas. This brown area, the Seleucus, the green area, forget how to pronounce that, and the yellow area, how do they pronounce that, and then the purple area over Egypt and up into Israel. Right? The Ptolemaic area, I don't know if that's right, how to pronounce it, but whatever. And these 4 sections were still part of the Greek kingdom. But they were a divided kingdom now. And they didn't all get along. It's not like we have the United States of 50 states, that the Greek is now from 1 now to 4, but it was still the Greek kingdom, but they warred against each other. His 4 generals ended up dividing up the land among them and continually fighting over it. Especially what affected Israel was the battle between this kingdom, the Seleucus kingdom, and the Ptolemaic, whatever, kingdom. And so Israel is stuck right in the middle. And so as they're constantly warring between the two, they're constantly coming across Israel, trampling through it, and fighting over that landmass. Fighting over Israel. If they can gain Israel, then they can maybe gain a little bit further. And so Israel is constantly the rope in the tug of war taking place between these groups. And it went on for, as we saw, close to 200 years after Alexander, and so it continued on in this fashion, again, for close to 200 years. We come to towards the end of that time period, and Antiochus Epiphanes comes along, and there were a lot of Antiochus. Antiochus is like named president or like Pharaoh. There's a bunch of them. David, I need your help back there. Someone needs to click something off there. And, yep. And so he comes along and he pushes the Hellenization process, forcing it upon people and nations that are not following it. Now, by that time, the northern portion, the Seleucus kingdom, has now gained the Israel territory. And so he comes through and he even replaces the high priest. So he's even affecting things taking on in the temple. He replaces the high priest with his own high priest, one that has become Hellenized, one who is worshiping the idols, and one who is really embracing the Greek religion, Greek culture, and everything about it. And so he's down in Egypt warring, and Egypt calls upon Rome. And so we see Rome starting to come on the scene here, and they ask Rome to come and help them out. Rome sends a letter telling him to back off. And he does. He's fearful of Rome. So he's not really very mighty. He just thinks he's real mighty. And so he's real angry that he can't continue with his conquest. And so he goes back home. On his way back home, he's passing through Israel. Well, while he was there in Egypt fighting, the Jewish people, we kicked out his high priest and put in one that we wanted. And so when he finds that out, he gets really angry and he slaughters 40,000 civilians, innocent people. So again, he's not real tough. He's not willing to take on Rome. He wasn't able to take on Egypt, but he can kill a bunch of women and children and unarmed men. And so that's what he does. And then he begins to begin this process of Hellenization even more, putting a statue of Zeus inside the sanctuary, inside the temple of God, restricting and outlawing circumcision and kosher eating and Sabbath. And so it begins taking away our religion by commanding us not to follow our religion. And it's interesting today in Europe and other parts of the world where there are attempts, and even going forward with it, of outlawing the ritual slaughter, the kosher slaughtering of animals, as well as attempts to outlaw circumcision. And in some countries for a time period they were able to outlaw it, and then it got reversed. And so we're almost seeing this whole process take place again. History repeating itself over and over again. The nice thing with history repeating itself is that we always win. In the end, we've always won, and so that's why we're here celebrating Hanukkah today. And so we can trust history to repeat itself again, and by God's grace, God will win, and God will give us the victory again, and we will survive down to the very end of time and on through eternity. And so as they were going through this process, they went to various villages, and one village in particular, the story continues, and they tried to get the rabbi to eat the pork, the leader, to influence the rest of the people. He refused, and so they said, well, just put it to your mouth. You don't have to eat it, just put it up towards your mouth. And they were hoping that just that symbolism, people seeing it, maybe in the crowd, in the distance, they would think he ate it, and that would be enough to weaken their moral courage, and that they would yield as well, and start to try and break down the principles of following of God's ways and God's laws. Well, he refused to do that, and so they slaughtered him and killed many of the others. And so they would go through village to village and doing this type of process, and sometimes they went to a village called Modim and tried to get them to sacrifice a pig on an altar. And they tried to get the leader of that community, Mattathias, to do so. He refused to do so, but he raised up and fought back with his sons, and they rebelled, and they killed all the Greek soldiers who had come to that village and chased the other ones away. And they knew that eventually they're going to come back with even a bigger army and more men and more soldiers. And so they then go and hide in the woods, and people begin to attract to them and build up a guerrilla warfare group. And this is what became known as the Maccabees. And that term Maccabees, one of the theories or traditions on where it comes from is the word or the sentence Mika Mocha Bolim Adonai, which is right out of the scriptures, and it means, who is like unto thee, O Lord? Who is like unto thee, O Lord, among the gods? Right? And so it's 4 words, and you take the first letter of each word and make an acronym out of it, and it becomes Maccabee. And so we have a song that we sing, and so we're going to sing that song together, and Brenda and Sarah are going to be leading us on that.
Mika Mocha Varim Adonai, Mika Mocha Nedar Bakodesh Nora Tehilot Hosef Elei, Mika Mocha Varim Adonai, Mika Mocha Nedar Bakodesh Nora Tehilot Hosef Elei, Mika Mocha Varim Adonai, Mika Mocha Nedar Bakodesh Nora Tehilot Hosef Elei. Mika Moka, Nedaba Kodesh Nora, Tehilot, Osefele, Ahuka, Rayu Maneka, Kaya Lifne Moshe. Moka, Nedaba Kodesh Nora, Tehilot, Osefele, Mika Moka, Bali Madonai, Mika Moka, Nedaba Kodesh Nora, Tehilot,
So that's pretty good to be named, right? Who is like unto thee, O Lord, right? Among the gods, right? In other words, our God is greater than all the other gods. See how that fits in? Just with that was the whole thing, right? They're trying to influence and trying to remove our God and trying to replace it with their false gods. And here they are called the Maccabees. That our God, who is like unto thee, O God? Right? Show yourself, God. Show yourself as the mighty one, the God above all gods, right? The Lord of lords and King of kings, right? And so the name is just really appropriate there. Well, Mattathias eventually dies, and his son, one of his sons, Judah Maccabee, then takes over in his place. And we see in some of the quotes from them how faithful they were and how they encouraged one another. One of the last words that Mattathias was saying to his family and to those that joined forces with them was that God would give them the victory, to trust in the Lord their God, that God had seen us through in the past, that God had delivered us through the Passover, and God has delivered us down through the ages, and that God would continue to fight for us and deliver us again. And so, with encouraging words and faithful words, they resisted and continued to fight against the Syrian army. Now, the Syrian army was, again, a very mighty army, and they didn't have tanks as we know them today. But did this get unplugged when you changed something? Dave, can you go to the next slide back there? Okay, before we get into that, a song about Judah Maccabee, Judah again the son. This rabbi wrote a song, fun song. Actually, it's a takeoff, or however they do that, parody of a song that was written about Mozart, but he takes that and applies that to Judah Maccabee, and he talks about the bravery of Judah and the Maccabees in the song. Okay.
He was a rebel with a God and he would never say die. He was a fierce fighter and a Jewish guy. There was a song about the start. It was the rhythm in his heart. So the people screamed, "Young Rocky Machiavelli." He was a superstar. He was so popular. The people stopped to stare because he had such flair. He was charismatic like a cool rock star. His time to stand and shout, "Come on, Rocky Machiavelli." Machiavelli, 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 I'm coming Rocky Machiavelli. oppressive rules. He vowed to take the soldiers down and make them look like fools. He was no slave to the grind, he had the temple on his mind. He wanted freedom of religion, not submission or derision. He was a superstar, he was so popular, the people stopped to stare because he had such flair. He had a charisma, he was a rocket, he who hammer, so his fans cried out, come on, Rocky Macabales. Macabales, 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 no more Macabales. I'm gonna rock you like a bell. Macabales, 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 no more Macabales. I'm gonna rock you Macabales. Oh, 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 oh. Gonna rock you like a nail. Oh, 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 oh. Come on, rock me. Gonna rock me like a nail.
Okay. You good? And we see there, as mentioned in the song, their fight was for religious. It was religious freedom that they were fighting for, which is a whole lot different than a lot of wars that have taken place down through the ages. And this one sets it apart. As we saw in that chart, I mean, we put up with Babylon, we put up with Persians, the Medo-Persians, and we put up with a lot of the Greek. It was when they said we could no longer worship God. That's when they went over the red line, serious red line, and we take our red line seriously, right? And they go over the red line, that's it, you know? And that was the issue, and where Mattathias and Judah and the rest of the Maccabees fought back. Now this is what they were fighting against. I mean, a little picture here, against elephants. The Syrians had elephants that they would come and charge out. That is not a picture of the Maccabees. I mean, these down people here in horses. They didn't have horses. They were farmers. They were not allowed to have weapons, and so they were fighting with shovels and whatever they can get. And when they would win, then they'd get some of the weapons from the Syrians. But miraculously, they won battle after battle after battle after battle. And every time, Antiochus would send more people and larger armies, and each time God gave the victory, literally miraculously, in conquering this. It was the power of the world at that time. It was like, the United States today, or back like the United States or Russia during the Cold War. It was the power of the day, and to go from a people group, I mean, it would be like almost like the American Indians trying to take over the United States today, which might not be a bad idea, but but that's the analogy, and then winning, and continuously winning, and defeating, and so Antiochus, although he thought he was great. And he gives himself this great name, but he really was a madman, and he overshot his boundaries. He wasn't able to beat Rome. He wasn't able to beat Egypt. He wasn't even able to beat a bunch of Jewish farmers. And we're not, so even with elephants and, you can fit I'm saying like 9 people on top of that, with bows, arrows, and stuff like that, and shooting. And so God gave the victory. Because who is like unto thee, O Lord, our God, among the gods? And that's really the miracle of Hanukkah. It's gotten replaced a little bit with, we get the candles and all like that, and we'll get into a little bit about that. But the real miracle is that God placed it in the heart of these people. And they were Kohens. The Maccabees, they were priests. They were religious priests from the Cohen family. And so they weren't trained warriors. And God gave them the courage and the strength to stand up against the odds so that they could worship God freely. That was what was most important to them, worshiping God freely. And we saw just recently with Hanukkah, right? That was the whole issue with the pilgrims. They left Europe so they could worship God freely at the risk of their lives, many of them losing their lives. And all the Maccabees did eventually die in various battles and things. And so it was more important to them to worship God than life itself. And it should be more important to us to worship God than life itself. Than a television program or some event going on or something else. Worshiping God needs to be the first and most important. More important than work, more important than anyone, our parents, our spouses, anyone. God needs to be first. And that's the whole Bible, but I mean that's the theme of Hanukkah. That they put God first, and God blessed, and God took care of them, God protected them, and God gave them the freedom to worship Him. And God will do that for us as well. Whatever the struggles we have against it, whether our boss is telling us we can't, whatever, trying to restrict us in some way, shape, or form, we can pray, trust in the Lord, work through various means, and God will make a way so that we can worship Him according to how He has outlined for us to worship Him. Because all of God's commandments in His Bible are His commandments, His promises that He wants to fulfill in us. He wants to show us that He is almighty, that He is able to work the miracle and work out the situation so that we are able to have enough money at the end of the month, that we are able to worship Him on the Sabbath, that we are able to follow His ways and prosper. That's the miracle He's wanting to demonstrate on the earth. If we will trust Him, if we will put Him first, if we will watch Him work, as He did here at the first Hanukkah occasion. And they were able to go back and liberate the temple, liberate Jerusalem, and they took out all the idols, Zeus, and all the other garbage, and got rid of it, and began to put the items back in pieces of furniture that God said should be in the temple. What do you think of the very first item that they put into the temple when they started to rededicate it? The menorah, right? Or the ark. Some people said the ark, right? The first was the altar. The altar was first. Now, it probably wasn't a brick altar like the picture, but the altar. So that they can sacrifice animals, because that's how God ordained for us to receive forgiveness of sins. So that was primary to them. We need to be able to receive the forgiveness of sins. And so that was the first thing. It was the first thing that came into the sanctuary, and it was the first thing that they set back up and rededicated, and that's what the word Hanukkah means, dedication. That's where we get the word, because they were rededicating the temple back to God. Rededicating it back to God's word. In order to purify all the other pieces of furniture, you needed blood. So you needed the sacrifice. So they would offer the sacrifice. So that was the first thing. So the sacrifice is the first stage in our walk with the Lord. We come to Him, we receive forgiveness for our sins that He has provided for us. And that's the whole role of the Messiah. That's why He has given us the Messiah, to receive the forgiveness as our sacrifice for us. Then they got to the menorah and put back up the menorah. And now the menorah was to be lit hours, 7 days a week, always continually burning. That's what the Bible commanded. And so they set it up and got it ready for lighting of the menorah. And the tradition goes, or the story goes, and no doubt God was able to do this, that they only had enough purified oil for what they found in the temple for one night. Again, it's supposed to be lit all the time, and so they decide whether we wait till we're able to get more olive oil, pure first press olive oil, or should we go ahead and light it now and then not have any for tomorrow. They decide, let's go ahead and light it now. They lit it so they could dedicate the temple, and the story goes that it remained lit for 8 days, and so until they were able to get more oil to continue the lamps burning continuously. That again becomes the miracle of Hanukkah, but the real miracle of Hanukkah is not that God can make oil last 8 times as long. That's nothing for God. You know, He's able to make things in our life last longer. That is easy for Him. The harder thing is Him giving us the courage and the strength to take a stand for Him. And that's why that's the real miracle of Hanukkah. That Mattathias and the Maccabees were willing to stand for God. And then win the battle. But even winning battles is easy for God. Beating the Syrians or whoever, that's easy for God. It's the changing of our hearts. That is the real miracle. And so this is the area that they were able to conquer under the time of the Maccabees. Basically, the red there is what Israel is today, present-day Israel, And so they were able to conquer most of that, and even a little bit into what is current day Jordan. So they had both sides of the Dead Sea, both sides of the Sea of Galilee, both sides of the Jordan River. And so, I mean, that's still really nothing compared to that map where we saw where the Greek kingdom was, right? I mean, that was humongous, right? It's just a little piece. That's all we're asking for. Just give us a little piece of land where we can worship God freely, right? And they said, oh, we got all this, we want yours too. We got 99% of the Middle East, we want yours too. You know, and that's what the Greeks, and that's what the Romans, and that's what all of them have done to us. But God has won, and God will continue to win. And they began minting their own coins. One of the things they put on the coin was a menorah. And still today in Israel, one of the coins they have has a menorah on it. I think that's the 10th of the shekel one. I think that has that on it. And so now we're going to sing another song. And this one talks about the lighting of the candles and the victory of faith for victory over our enemies.
Great miracle happened in a faraway ancient land. Great warriors, the Maccabees, decided to take a stand and fought their fight with passion, for their cause was a righteous one, that their people should be respected till the last battle was won. Light the candle of freedom, light the candle of hope, and illuminating generations, let every girl and boy know that once there was a people who fought for the right to be free, and that is just what Hanukkah means to me. When the battle was over, the war was won, the people gathered to give thanks for all that God had done. But the temple was in ruins, only one tiny candle remained, but miraculously that flame burned for 8 nights and days. The candle of freedom, light the candle of hope, illuminating generations, let every girl and boy know that once there was a people who fought for the right to be free, and that is just what Hanukkah means to me. Miracles in our lifetime can be hard for us to perceive, maybe tough to handle, but look at those candles and you just gotta believe. Light the candle of freedom, light the candle of hope, illuminating generations, let every girl and boy know that once there was a people who fought for the right to be free, and that is just what Hanukkah means to me. Light the candle of freedom, light the candle of hope, illuminating generations, let every girl and boy know that once there was a people who fought for the right to be free, and that is just what Hanukkah means to me. The candle of freedom, light the candle of hope, illuminating generations, let every girl and boy know that once there was a people who fought for the right to be free, and that is just what Hanukkah means to me. The candle
Amen. And that's what it should mean to us as well, right? Lighting the freedom, religious freedom, that we can worship God. Okay, some more questions. Why 7 branches on some menorahs? Why 9 branches on other menorahs? And why do we celebrate it for 8 days? Okay, let's start with the first one. Why do some menorahs have 7 branches? That's right. That's what God commanded in building the temple. It says to build it with 7 branches, right? That's what it says. So that's what God said, so that's what we do, right? So that's what Solomon did, and that's what Moses did, right? And so the temple menorah had 7 branches. Okay, and then we'll skip why the 9 branches. We'll come back to that. Why 8 days? The oil lasted 8 days. Good, somebody was listening, right? And that might be true, and that could very well be true. I think there's a more biblical reason, which we don't have time tonight to get into. But what again is the name of the holiday? Hanukkah, right? And what does Hanukkah mean? Dedication, right. We look at dedicating in the Bible. Dedicating, the first temple was dedicated. Solomon dedicated the temple with an 8-day festival. Right, when do you dedicate your son to the Lord? On what day? On the 8th day, right, with the circumcision, right? And the same with the animals and the sacrifices. And so we see throughout the Bible, the 8th day is the day of dedication. And so they no doubt, knowing that, knowing the temple was originally with Solomon, dedicated over 8 days, dedicated over an 8-day period of time. Again, no doubt that God was able to make the oil, and if that's the miracle, if that really happened, I believe that, no problem. But that also could have been added or became the focus because all the years that we were dispersed to other nations, you don't necessarily want your occupier or the nation you're in wanting to know that every year you're celebrating how your little band of army took over this big army and wiped them out, right? It might not be treated very favorable in some parts of the world if that's, you think of all the years under Russia or other places, if under communism and things, that we're saying, hey, we didn't have many and we beat all of them anyway. And so the focus then no doubt shifted towards, well, God gave us a lot of oil. The oil kept burning. But I think the biblical reason is for the 8. Either way, we celebrate it for 8 days, and that's why we have the lower candles on for 8 days, one for each day. But then we have this 9th candle, which you guys designated as the servant candle, the Shamas candle. That's right. That's right. And so before we get to that, let's sing about the 8 days. I keep forgetting these songs. Okay. So 8 days of Hanukkah. This was written by a senator from Utah. Yeah. Not quite a Jewish boy, but a senator from Utah, Orrin Hatch. And he wrote this song for Hanukkah.
Hanukkah, oh Hanukkah, the festival of light. In Jerusalem, the oil burned bright. They lit the menorah in that holy place. What a miracle to last 8 days. 8 days of Hanukkah, come let's celebrate. 8 days of Hanukkah, let's celebrate tonight. Hey, 8 days of Hanukkah, come let's celebrate. Come let's celebrate tonight. A small band of people led the way through the darkest night they prayed, seeking religious freedom, did more than just survive. They defeated a mighty empire, free to believe, just the way they wanted to. It made history. 8 days of Hanukkah, come let's celebrate. 8 days of Hanukkah, let's celebrate tonight. Hey, 8 days of Hanukkah, come let's celebrate. Come let's celebrate tonight. La 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 la.
Okay, so celebrate Hanukkah, and in that song, not bad for a senator, huh? In that song, he mentions, again, religious freedom, right? Again, that being the theme, so he caught that. Okay, so where in the Holy Scriptures is Hanukkah mentioned? Not?
John 10:22.
Very good, Greg. All right, in the book of John, in the Gospel of John, it was the Feast of Dedication, right? And that's what Hanukkah means. The word Hanukkah is dedication. It was the Feast of Dedication in Jerusalem, and it was winter. I know it doesn't feel like that here in Florida, but it was winter. Doesn't feel like that in Jerusalem right now either. But it was winter, right? So obviously, again, we see the parallel there. And Yeshua walked into the temple, and so Yeshua was celebrating Hanukkah during the time of Hanukkah, in the winter time, during the Feast of Dedication. He went down from Galilee, came down to Jerusalem as he did for the other feasts, and he comes into the temple, into Solomon's porch, and he's no doubt teaching there, and the people asked him, "Are you the Messiah?" Good question. And he realized from what he had been teaching that he believed he was the Messiah, and he confirms that. And it's a whole long passage there of his confirmation that he is the Messiah. And they understand exactly what that means. And that's why many people accepted him. Many of the Jewish people there in that area accepted him as the Messiah then and thereafter, after his death and everything. But there were those that didn't. And so we see that taking place in this chapter, but it's taking place during the time of Hanukkah, during the time of the Feast of Dedication. Now, I mentioned about this Shamas candle, right? The Shamas candle is the servant candle. And as you saw as we lit our candles, a bunch of them are already burned out. But as we lit the candles, we lit them using the Shamas candle, right? We lit the Shamas candle first, and then we lit the other ones using the Shamas candle. And so it is the servant candle that is used to light all the others. Now, it's all right, we first night light the Shamas candle, and then we start on the end, and then do as we did tonight. Now in Isaiah chapter 52 and chapter 53, another again powerful chapter, it'd be good to read the whole entire chapter 53, Isaiah chapter 53, talks about the Messiah. Long before Yeshua came onto this earth, long before Yeshua was born and came here. And the Jewish prophet Isaiah writes, he says, "My servant shall prosper and be exalted and raised to great heights," right? And the Shamas candle, sometimes it's in the middle, but it's not always in the middle. There's some menorahs down there that don't have it in the middle, right? But wherever it is on the menorah, sometimes it's in the front, sometimes it's in the back, but it's always raised up. And that's exactly what the prophet says. "My servant shall prosper and be exalted and raised to great heights." And that's exactly what we do with the Shamas candle when we design the menorah and all different kinds of menorahs. And so, raised to great heights. Just as the many were appalled at him, so we see both those things going on. He's exalted to great heights, accepted by many as the Messiah, but also others being appalled at him. And that's exactly what we saw happen. Right? So Isaiah is prophesying it long beforehand, hundreds of years beforehand. When it takes place just that way. And God goes on and says, "My righteous servant makes the many righteous." So just as the Shamas candle lights the other candles, it says, "My righteous servant will make others righteous." So his righteousness or his light is passed on, his flame, his fire, the Holy Spirit is passed on to the other lights. So right in Isaiah 53, it's describing Hanukkah, describing at least the menorah aspect of it in a prophetic way. Goes on and says about him, it is their punishment that he bears. And again, what was the first piece of furniture that the Maccabees built back into the temple and dedicating it? Was the altar for sacrificing, because again, the animal sacrifice, the lamb, had to bear our punishment, to be our substitute, and the Messiah coming as that servant, as that lamb, to bear our punishment, to bear our guilt. He exposed himself to death, just like that lamb in the sacrifices, and he bore the guilt of many and made intercession for the sinners. Again, just like the lamb. That was the whole purpose of the lamb and the altar and the sacrifices taking place in the temple. And that's exactly what Yeshua did. He exposed himself to death. He bore the guilt of many so that we don't have to bear our own guilt. right? We're loaded down with guilt, right? You know, our mothers are real good at that, right? They lay us down with the Holy Spirit and it convicts us and lays the guilt upon us, and we can turn it over to the Lord. Right? Can't get rid of the guilt any other way. It's not measuring out good deeds compared to bad deeds that'll somehow get rid of the guilt. We did something wrong. There's nothing that washes it away that we can do. We can say sorry to the person 1,000 times. But as far as the record books of heaven, and to get it off of our minds and out of our hearts, and to really see forgiveness, is only through surrendering it and giving it over to the Messiah. Allowing Him to bear our punishment. Allowing Him to bear our guilt. And then God removes the guilt from us, places it upon Him, and He received the punishment in our behalf. That's what Isaiah prophesied. That's what God set up with Moses and building the temple. It goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. That's the system that God set up. That the sacrifice, that the lamb representing the Messiah would bear our guilt and take it away. Take our punishment for us. And really, if there was no Hanukkah, if there was no Maccabees, if there was no fight to liberate the temple, if there was not the faith that God can give us the power to liberate the temple, if there was no burning in their hearts to worship God truly. I mean, we easily could have just assimilated and, say, hey, the Greek culture is good and interesting and all like this and be prosperous and make it easier. Could have just assimilated into the world around us. Watch their television programs, go to their websites, do all the things like everyone around us. Dress like they do, act like they do, eat like they do. That would have been easy. And today, that's what a lot of people are doing. Still professing and saying we still love God or we pray or whatever. But it's more than just praying. It's following. And if it wasn't for the Maccabees willing to take that stand to follow God and worship God, the Messiah would have had no temple to come to. The Messiah would have had no people to come to. This Hanukkah story was crucial, as well as everything prior to it and after it, in order for the prophecy to take place as it did. For the Messiah to come to the temple. For the Messiah to come and be the sacrifice for us. So Hanukkah is very important in laying the stage for our redemption. Yeshua said, I am the light of the world in John chapter 8. And in Matthew chapter 5, he says, you are the light of the world. Well, which one is it? Again, look at the menorahs, right? Any of them? He is the light of the world. And He makes us lights to the world. Yeah, right? It's not in our own strength. It's not in our own power. We don't have any natural light of ourselves. He needs to touch us. We need to allow Him to touch us. Right? And as He touches us, we get lit with His fire. Right? He takes away our guilt, takes away our sinfulness and our sinful tendencies, our sinful desires, and then He lights us up with His Spirit, with His oil, with His mind, with His heart, with His power, and He shines us brightly. And then shining brightly, when all 9 are lit up, all 9 on the candles or, outside in the big menorah, and all 9 are lit up, it burns much brighter. And He wants us to be unified together in Him and with one another. Not individual 9 single candles, but one menorah. With Him as the center, as Him as lifted up, with Him as the high one, with Him as the most important and the only important, and then He lights us up and then we all shine together. More brightly, unified together, as a mishpocha together, as a family together, as a congregation together, as a people together, shining brightly for Him to the world. Thus, He is the light of the world, and we are lights to the world as well. So again, we see the Hanukkah menorah and the Hanukkah festivity finding its fulfillment in the Bible and the Scriptures, in the principle and the analogy. And so the one lights all the others and burns brightly for Him. And so tonight I invite us to let the Shamas, the servant, Yeshua the Messiah, the light of this world, bear your guilt and light you with His righteousness. My righteous servant shall make the many righteous. Okay? And so I'd like to pause in our service. We're going to continue on. We still got some more songs and other things to do. We certainly want to eat and everything else. But I want to pause right now in the service, and I want to have a word of prayer. And I want to invite each of us to dedicate and rededicate our lives to the Lord. And if we're not shining brightly for Him, if we're not filled with His love, if we're not manifesting His grace, and we're not following His word, we can allow Him, we can turn it over to Him in prayer, just individually, privately, right where you're at. Just surrender it to God, allow Him to remove whatever guilt is there, whatever sin is there, whatever area that your life is not in harmony with His word, whatever area you've been compromising, what area you've been Hellenizing and just mixing with the world and assimilating into the world. And allow God to cleanse you, wash you clean, and to light you on fire for Him. Fill you with His Spirit, with His power. Shine brightly for Him. And to be unified. If there's any argument, fight, any unforgiveness in your heart, surrender that to God. Allow God to remove it away, bitterness, anger, so that He can reunite and unite together, dedicate together. Pray together. Our Lord and our God, King of the universe, we are thankful for your love. We are thankful for the history of Hanukkah. We are thankful, Lord, for your deliverance in our lives. We're thankful, Lord, that you've protected us and saved us and brought us down to this day. We are still here today. Antiochus is gone, the others are gone, but we're still here. Praise your name. Thank you for providing the Messiah that we can receive forgiveness of sins. Thank you, Yeshua, that you're alive and you're able to touch us. Touch us right now. Touch us with your flame. Remove from us all guilt. Remove from us all insecurities and fears and angers and bitterness, lack of faith. Heal us, Lord. Wash it out of our lives. Touch us. Reach down from heaven, grab a hold of us. Light us with your fire. Light us with a love for you. Light us with a passion for you. Light us with love for one another. Cause us to burn brightly for you. Take a stand for you. And to let this little light shine in our neighborhood. Let this little light shine unitedly together all around this world. In Yeshua's holy name.